Welcome to Bring Out Your Badass Self, a movement to break your negative thoughts and habits and instead focus on building each other up and encouraging fearless authenticity.
Each week, we will get vulnerable and share experiences alongside our guests and audience. Come rediscover your inner badass self.
Good morning, badass.
Good morning, badass. How are you doing this Friday?
I am good. I'm ready for the weekend. There's something about these short weeks, like, make it like so intense where like you would think, oh, okay, just got to get through, less days. And it would, but it feels like so crunched by like Wednesday. I'm like, is it the weekend yet? Come on. How about you? How are you?
I had a really good holiday extended weekend with family and everything. We did top golf together and just had some fun. And it was just a very relaxing, good weekend spent with family. So it was much needed. Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Well, good morning to our fellow badasses out there.
Yes.
Say hello when you get here.
I did have a few people, by the way, that reached out to me and said, I got a meeting. I have, someone who was doing picking up things on a beach whale or a whale beach or something like that, but they were picking, that was a part of the thing that they were doing. And then someone else was like, oh, I really want to join, but today they had a conflict. So I had like 3 people that reached out to me saying, I'm really loving the show, but I unfortunately can't make it today. So I said, no worries, just watch it afterwards. And by the way, picking up stuff off the beach to help the whales, I like that. So it sounds like a good reason to have to miss.
Yeah, for sure. I don't have an opportunity to do that. There's no whales in Lake Michigan, although I've had that debate with my children because it's so large. Yeah, in fact, it was Oscar refused to call it a lake for a couple years when he was little. He called it a sea.
Oh,
because it's so big. So
yeah. And if you're new, then be sure to give us a white heart just to let us know that you're new. And so I do see some familiar faces. Good morning, Eric. He said, good badass morning. As he says, how are we already at episode 26? I know.
I think we're going to have to do something special for like 50 and then 100 or, but I bet it'll be here before we know it. I mean, I can't even believe we're over halfway to 50.
I know. I mean, when you think about that, because we're halfway through the year of what we started, because 52 weeks in a year, we're at 26 now. So this is actually our halfway mark. I didn't even think about that.
Yes, you're right. This is our halfway mark. This is exactly our halfway mark. We started on St. Patrick's Day.
Yes.
And then, so we started with a holiday and we're at our mid-mark at a holiday.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, good morning, Myra. And we can see her name. So Facebook is cooperating today.
Right. Thank you, Facebook.
Good morning, Bruce. Bruce, reached out to me and he's like, I wouldn't miss it. And, I love his comment. Let's do this badass shit.
Yes, I love it too. Good morning, Bruce.
And then good morning, Kim. She said, good morning and happy Friday, you badass ladies.
Good morning, Kim. I think Kim's never missed one, but for a second earlier this morning, I got nervous and I was like, I should maybe tell Kim to come because I think she's going to really like our art today. She's just going to get such a kick out of it. But, and then I was like, well, she's never missed. So I don't think I even need to.
So thank you all for joining us. And Kate, I'm excited about this particular topic.
Yeah, I think we have some fun stuff. We have some
Mhm.
really cool, interesting, unique perspectives, and some cool stuff to talk about. So I am too.
Yeah. So I'm going to post a link into the comments. And
Yeah.
what I found interesting is recently we were taking a look at our statistics on the Full Sail Partners page. And I wrote this article back in 2015. And I found it interesting that this particular article was getting over 20,000 hits just this year. And so it was the blog of all blogs on our website.
The
It was
top
getting
log.
the top blog. It was getting the most hits from any blog we've ever done back in 2015. And I was like, wow, I'm like, how appropriate, because it was called 7 Ways to Overcome Obstacles. And so I was even talking about it back in 2015 on how to overcome obstacles. But I just found it interesting that it had that many views for one
Yeah.
in just a year's time, and that it was the most viewed. And what it really told me is that people really need help with their perception.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's amazing that, even at a software firm where, most, I would say 90% of our blogs are about our software.
Right.
But we do tend to do some other blogs once in a while, on some
Hmm.
soft skill type things, or just general business things, or just sometimes a little bit of fun things when we're going to an event or something, right? But
Yeah.
I mean, this blog being the top blog, I mean, when you think about, like, so it's like, that 10% is shining so high. So like people are looking more for soft skills, potentially, than they are anything else, which is,
Yeah.
that's a really interesting thing to think about.
It really is. It ended up sort of shifting a little bit of our mindset for next year,
Yeah.
for
Oh,
2024, and thinking about some of the topics we might actually talk about. And so we used it as an inspiration. But I
yeah.
want to use this as a learning lesson for everyone. And so I wanted to share something that my husband said to me. And so the last show that we had, I was talking about how my husband was very nurturing and how amazing he was and how much he really takes care of me. And his response to me was, well, you help me view things differently. He said, like the other
Mm.
day, I thought our plans were ruined, and you quickly came up with an idea and turned the situation around, and it became a better day than we had even planned. And so
Yeah.
when you really think about those types of things, that is really what you have: an obstacle, you have a perception of this is what I expected it to be, and then it's no longer that. So it's like, then how will you handle that? Will you continue to dwell in the fact that now all your plans were ruined, or will
Right.
you potentially look for the opportunity and how you could even make it better?
Yeah. I love that. And I love that you were able to share something with him. And then his response was to be like, well, thanks for saying that. But you know what? I want to tell you something that you do for me.
I
You
know.
know, I love that. I love that interaction and like balance that you guys have. That's lovely.
It is. And so today we want to focus on our audience. We want it to be interactive. We have a couple of different things that we're going to do. And so we are going to start with having you think about something you're struggling with. So, an
Mm,
obstacle you face, maybe it's personal, maybe it's related to your career, or maybe it's work related. So, think about something that you're struggling with that you perceive as an obstacle. So get it in your mind. And in a minute, we're going to ask just a simple question to start you down the path of beginning to tackle it. And so, Cate, we have some other things we're going to share today while people are thinking
yes.
about that. And so today we're doing actually something a little bit different. We're not doing music, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, we decided to kind of switch it up a little bit. And as I think, as a lot of people, when they really invest their energy into something that they're passionate about, like you and I have done, it starts to make you a little more creative, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think you and I have been, thinking about different ways that we can showcase some art as well.
Yeah. Do you want to show the artwork first?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So Jenna actually helped me with this. So, and there's a connection to this and the other piece that we have. So there's a Gaia symbol in the background to kind of show like the oneness. And then there's, a mountain there, and obviously the sign obstacles ahead. But what really shines in this little art, digital art piece we made is this quote from Bob Ross, the painter. So like you can remember in the 70s and 80s, and maybe did he paint into the 90s? I think he did, right?
Yeah.
I think he was around for a very long time.
Long time, yeah.
Yes. Yep. So he is a painter. He had a really gentle voice. He was, I think some people thought he was like a little too flamboyant or something, at times. But
Someone said pretty little trees.
Yes, and that with the obstacles. But Bob, when he would make a mistake on his paintings, he would call them happy accidents. So like if he, accidentally the brush hit somewhere, somebody said, Bob is the shit. He is the shit. Bob Ross is definitely the shit. I'm glad that he's, that the energy around him has shifted, right? To where people are like totally into talking about him. But anyway, he would like if he made a little dash in it with his paintbrush next to something, he would turn it into something else and he would call it a happy accident.
Mm-hmm.
So I did not know of this until my 8-year-old shared it with me. And he actually shared it with me when he was like 6 or 7. But he has a wicked memory. So he remembered all about it. And that leads us into our next little piece of art that we put together today for you.
So today, instead of an inspirational audio of someone singing, it's going to be an audio video of gaining some insight from kids. And so here is Happy Accident, inspired by Bob Ross. And we have Xavier and Breland, correct?
Yes, exactly. You said it correctly.
Here we go.
Okay. Hi, guys. So,
Hi.
Who are you?
Xavier Jude Robert Phillips.
Wow. What a name. Who are you?
I'm Breland and Ralph Phillips.
Yes, you are. Okay. How old are you guys?
I'm 8. I'm 6.
Yay. Okay.
How old are you?
I am 44.
Okay.
So, you taught me about something called happy accidents.
Yep.
Do you remember where you learned that?
It's from this show called Xavier Riddle.
Xavier Riddle. Your name is Xavier.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what's a happy accident?
It's when something bad happens and they turn into a good thing.
Oh.
Yes.
Yes. Very good, Breland. Okay. So, have you guys ever experienced happy accidents?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Do you want to tell me about it?
Sure.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so one time I was playing Minecraft with my other sister
Okay.
named Joe.
Yeah.
And then I built these things in Minecraft, and I built a house for me and Joe to live in.
Yeah.
And then one time she accidentally burnt her room down, and I had to fix it with water.
Oh, I remember that. And you came in and told us about it, and you said there was a happy accident.
That also happened twice.
That also happened twice.
In our old house and then our new one.
So you're keeping track, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Breland, do you have any happy accidents that you
Yes.
remember? Oh, you do? Do you want to tell us about it?
Yes.
Okay, go for it.
That's
Did you just say dose? Okay.
It's a una dos, tres, canta, sing a seis.
Okay. Thank you.
And then the house burned down.
All right. So thank you guys so much. I think our audience is going to like this a lot.
Oh my God.
Oh,
I
they
can't help
crack
but
me
to
up.
laugh. I've heard this a couple times now, but I just laugh every single time. And so, one, I just have to say that I love your interaction. You're like, wow, what a name. Just,
I-
I love the interaction you have with them, but I love the fact that they are learning that once they do something and maybe it didn't go quite the way they were expecting, they're not looking at it as negative. They're immediately like, oh, it's a happy accident. Like, look at this. Look at
yes.
what I created.
Yeah, exactly. So he came in and said this one time, and I was like, what is this happy accident? Tell me all about this, And so, in preparation for today, I was reading online, I was doing some research, and I came across, someone who, they have lots of different kind of ways that you turn obstacles into opportunities. And
Mhm.
one person said, like, one form of overcoming obstacles is recognizing mistakes you make routinely and then
Yes.
deciding to turn them into something else or fix them. But like turning them into something else seemed to be even more powerful, right?
Hmm.
And that kind of reminded me of the happy accidents thing. And I was like, what if we all saw our obstacles as happy accidents? And they're kind of, accidents and obstacles are kind of similar. Like we
They
don't
are.
want them to happen, right?
Right.
They just happen. you know?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so
So
I want
that's
to share a couple of comments here. So I think this is Casey. So Casey,
yes.
as you know, paints, and he said, "Keep painting, kids." And I'm not sure
Yeah.
who said. Maybe he said, "I'm in a happy accident," because then
I
Leslie
think so.
said, "I am too."
Same.
Same. And
yes.
so I, when you think about artwork, and one of the things he would always teach, because I remember growing up watching Bob Ross, that's one of the things that my mom loved watching was Bob Ross. He'd be like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I'm going to do a happy little tree. Oh, a happy little
yeah.
squirrel." And then he would actually, if you do something, oh, like, okay, this is now a happy little accident. It wasn't quite what he was planning, but he went with
hmm
it. Like, oh, okay, well, what can this become?
Right.
Oh, maybe this is now a little squirrel, that's in the tree.
Exactly. Yeah. And what wasn't con- incredibly clear in the audio with Xavier and Breland is that when he put water in it, what he did is he replaced that room with a pool. So that's what
Mm.
when he came in to tell us about it, he said, he our kids swear because they're homeschooled. He said, first I was really pissed off at Joe because she lit it on fire and I just had built it for her. And, then I was putting water in and then I realized I could turn it into a pool. And so that was the happy accident. That's how I fixed it.
That's
It
awesome.
right. It's such a great way to turn if you can get your kids to see things like that, how, great can it be in that moment to turn being pissed off at your sibling into something even better.
Yeah. All right. So, our audience, so you're thinking about that particular issue that you guys have. So, here is the question that we have for you. And I would love to have any interaction that you might have. And so, you've thought about what your challenge is, and you have that in your mind. The question now for you is, if it were up to me, I would. So anything is possible. So if you answer that question, here's your problem. You've identified what it is. Now think to yourself, if it were up to me, I would. And so, Kate, do you have anything as maybe an example of something you're dealing with while we have people sort of thinking through that?
Yeah, I mean, I am dealing with so many things, as always. But one of the things I'm dealing with, especially in a short week, like that is really relevant to me right now, is not procrastinating and staying on task and getting my shit done because I have a
Mm,
very long to-do list, and I feel like sometimes my my high energy around work and my creative side sometimes actually is an obstacle. Like I feel like my own brain sometimes gets in my way of getting stuff
Mm.
done, even though I want to get the stuff done.
Yeah.
Like
So what would you do? So if it were up to you, in order to get the things done, what would you do?
so I did end up coming up with some problem solving for this earlier in the week. My initial reaction, I will tell you, initially I thought, well, if I can just get my family to give me more time in my office, I can get this shit all done. Right. So, if it were up to me, I would clear my path. And it was really focused on externally at
Mhm.
first.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and then I had to kind of dig in further. But um, I think that's how a lot of people initially take a look at some of these obstacles, right? I don't think
Yeah.
that's I was able to catch my thought pattern, but
Yes.
it's it's hard to not. It's if you're not paying attention, it's easy to not catch something like that.
Yeah, so we have an interesting comment here. So Bruce said, when saying it is up to me, does that mean that I have resources I don't have?
Mm.
And so as I was thinking about this was one of the things that I found is that a lot of times when people start to think about solving the challenge, a lot of times the question that I have for you is, do you when you're looking at the solution, does it involve someone else, or was it something that you felt you could take the reins on? So, which way do you tend to go? Do you tend to go, oh, well, I need someone else to solve it, or I need other people to do it? Or are you able to figure out something where you can take the reins? Maybe it's not completely solving the issue, but maybe it's solving some things along the way. The other
Right.
thing that I found is that, were you controlling someone else, or were you controlling your own destiny? So a lot of times we think, well, if this person would just do this, then the
Yes.
problem's solved, right?
Right.
And so,
Everyone would just do what I want.
yeah, exactly. And so, but that doesn't, how does that, you can't really, as we've talked in the past, you can't control others, but do you focus on it by how can I control my own destiny? And so, people, as we started to go into this, and I started to do even further research, and there's actually a term for today's topic. And so, people have typically heard of IQ, which is the intelligence quotient. And so
Mhm.
IQ is something people know. People may not be as familiar with some of the other three. So there are actually four quotients. And so intelligence quotient, IQ, there's emotional quotient, which is EQ, then there's social quotient, so SQ, and then adversity quotient, which is AQ. And so, just to define two of them that we're going to be talking about today, which really have to do with focusing on turning obstacles into solutions. So, EQ, which is the emotional quotient, is the ability to understand, use, and manage your own emotions in positive ways to relieve stress, to communicate effectively, to empathize with others, and to overcome challenges and diffuse conflict. And so, where AQ is really the person's ability to manage difficulties and to transform obstacles into opportunities. And it goes back to what you were saying, Cate, is that they learn from mistakes and they believe that the next situation will be better. So it's not
Mm.
necessarily always about solving this problem, but like, okay, I'm learning from this. What have I learned from this? How can I apply
Right.
it the next time? But they're also looking at, okay, well, how can I possibly change this? What have I learned to be able to overcome the next time? And so AQ, I was like, I didn't even know there was an actual term for it as I started to do research on that.
Yeah, so cool. I had heard of AQ a long time ago. I think in like foster care training or something.
Okay.
But I'd never heard of social SQ.
Yeah.
Um, and EQ is something I definitely have heard of as
Sure.
well.
Yeah.
But I have never really done a ton of digging into AQ, adversity quotient. The reason why it came up in foster care is because these kiddos that have been through so much, they're little survivors, and so
Right.
their AQ goes up the roof because that's how they had to survive.
Hmm.
So it ends up, and we've tried to use this with our own kiddos. It ends up being like a little bit of a superpower. Um,
Mm.
so I think a cool way to think about AQ is to think of it as a superpower if you can boost it up. Now, in your research, Sarah, I forgot to ask you this ahead of time,
Oh,
so I
yeah.
hope. But can you like I always think of IQ, like you can't really do anything about it. Like you're born with a certain amount of intelligence,
Mhm.
but I think you can like maybe have a little bit of control over like boosting it,
You can.
but there'll be kind of like a ceiling at some point. But these other things, you actually like improve them on
You
your own, like if you want to.
You can, yeah, and so at the
Hmm.
very end, a part of we're gonna do actually a role play, and that's actually one of the ways that you can help
Okay.
yourself, is to give
Like,
yourself situations and to work on how it is that you would solve that particular issue.
wow. So like practicing it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, if you
totally.
don't practice it, then it basically is like any type of skill. If you're learning to paint, if you're learning a particular sport, anything, if you don't practice it or put actual effort thinking about, okay, this is something that I need to work on, then you won't continue to get better. But it's first, as you always, as we say with everything, you got to acknowledge this is something that you need to focus on.
Yeah, and I don't want to digress too much, but that practicing component, um, people don't think of that. I think,
Hmm.
they don't think about practicing their soft skills, just to kind of pull in a, phrase we were using earlier.
Yeah.
Um, because, one, it's not fun, but but because it's not physical, right? Like everybody knows if you're going to learn to practice, if you're
But
going to learn
isn't
to ride
that a
a bike,
perception? Sorry, like
it's a,
I find it fun.
right. Yeah. And I find it really calming so over the past couple of years, as I've dug into more of my internal stuff that I'm working on growing it, I do a ton of practicing. I practice coping skills. I
Yeah.
practice um, how I will handle a situation better the next time, and I
Yes.
do it all for myself.
Mhm.
And the I do it so that I'm more effective, right?
Mhm.
In general, but the other benefit to that is that I have a little bit of control. It makes me feel a little bit more like I'm in control of these situations
Mhm.
that sometimes just feel like landmines. They just happen to you, right?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, with AQ, there were
Yeah.
four elements, and the first one is control. And so control, people that had high AQ found that they felt they had control, or at least a perceived control, over any adverse situation. So, what they ultimately found is that they had the ability to turn adversity into an opportunity, but they really felt that they thought about, how can I control this, or how can I impact this. The second one was ownership. So they felt that they holded the capability to basically improve. They themselves are responsible for improving their current situation instead of someone else. So those first
Yeah,
two,
like
control and,
accountability.
yeah, and ownership.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes a ton of sense. The third one is reach. So the
Mhm.
third one goes a little external, but they actually when they've done studies and they said, okay, like individuals who had higher scores in the area of reach were able to feel empowered. They were able to deal with what's coming because of the way that they kind of perceived things.
Correct. And they also would perceive the good or bad event. Sometimes those that had low AQ would see that it would potentially influence other areas of their life. So let's say that something happens to you. Do you isolate it to, okay, this is just this specific event, or this, just limited to this event? Or do you think, oh, this is widespread, like now this is a part of my entire life, now this is work, this is personal? So they basically view it as good or bad and influencing other parts of their life. And so it could be good or bad. So whenever we think about bad situations, we might think, oh, nobody likes me, type thing. Or,
Right.
you might be like, oh, people really like me. You see it in your personal life, you see it in your business life, but it's the reach that it has. So whether it's good or bad in your perception.
Yes. Yeah. And so the last thing, the fourth of them is endurance.
Mhm.
So this is about, how optimistic are you? How much energy do you have to cope with it? Are you viewing this as a permanent thing or a
Mhm.
temporary thing?
Yeah.
That's where the endurance is. It's about it's your perception of how long is this positive or negative event going to be happening.
Yeah,
To me.
and what I found is endurance is also related to resilience. So how
Yeah.
resilient are you in handling the event? And
Yep.
so the perception of the duration of that positive or negative event. So, oh, this is just something temporary. I'll be able to, get over that and get past that. So I'm now becoming more resilient. Oh, I can handle it. This was just temporary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what was really interesting in the particular study is that it really focused on a particular practice. And I found this interesting because you would think that this particular type of practice, that they would have a lot of problem solving capabilities. So it was a group of nurses, and there were different ages. It was student nurses, and they were studying AQ specifically within nurses. So what they wanted to look at was how well they were able to focus on positive problem solving coping styles. And ultimately, what they have found is that when you are able to focus on positive problem uh, uh, skills in coping with situations, it helps you to reduce depression, for example. When you have a negative emotion focused coping style, that is when you start to have mental issues or mental health problems. So it's all about the positive versus the negative problem focusing. And so what they found is that those that had low AQ, they had a coping method, but it was a negative coping method. And so in these particular students, they were doing self blame, like, oh, this is my fault. Or they were doing evasion, like, oh, I'm just not going to deal with it. Or they went into sort of a fantasy of
Hmm.
things that weren't really reality. And that's what they found, that theirs was really about reducing the impact of the adversity. And so they were encountering setbacks because they were doing these different types of things of blaming themselves, evading what the reality was, and sort of going sometimes into a fantasy world, which I found fascinating.
Yeah, totally. That's super fascinating. And it does make some sense. I feel like potentially to those that do go into that, into the negative coping methods, my assumption is that they may not even be aware that they're doing it because it may be so habitual,
Yes.
or behavioral, that it feels like it's normal,
Yeah.
right?
They actually found that they were those with low AQ had a hard time being objective with the situation. And also they found some differences in females and males. They found that
Mm,
females tended to blame themselves while the males were actually able to focus on results of adversity. And so I
mm,
found that to be interesting as well. And so, one of the things that they really focused on is helping the students with their perception, with management and utilization of their emotions. So, what they ended up finding is that it wasn't just AQ, but it was also EI. So,
mm,
if you found what they found is people that had a higher EI, an emotional or an EQ, emotional intelligence, that actually helped them with the AQ part of the process. So when you think about, when we go back to emotional intelligence, what the definition was is it was the ability to understand, use, and manage your emotions in a
mm,
positive way to relieve stress, communicate effectively, empathize, overcome challenges, and diffuse conflict. So that is emotional intelligence, but that requires some observation of your actions and saying, okay, well, how can I view this differently? How can I view this in a positive way versus a negative way?
mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that makes so much sense. Um, in a lot in a bigger picture, right? But
Mhm,
I think it's not thought of very often. But our abilities to like regulate our own emotions
mhm,
um, is just so fundamental for everything else, right?
mhm,
I'm sure that EQ is correlated to IQ and SQ as well. I just feel like the
mm.
EQ's got to be so important at the end of the day when they actually like do all these different studies and figure these things out, because of that regulation piece, because our emotions drive so much.
Yeah, I don't know for sure, but my hypothesis would be that if you have a lower IQ but have a higher EQ and AQ, that it won't really matter that you're not smart, because if you're willing to find the solution in looking at it
Right.
to be, this obstacle is now an opportunity, you're turning it into an opportunity, and you're also able to handle conflict,
And
those
manage your
are
emotions. Yeah.
manage your emotions. I actually would probably put myself a little bit more in that. I think probably my IQ isn't as necessarily as high as many other people, but I think I have a very high AQ. Like I immediately go, oh, well, I could look at it this way, but I'm going to prefer to look at it this way. And so it's really finding the light, in the darkness of how people might perceive things. So it's constantly going, all right, well, I'm not going to accept that perception. I am going to look at it in this other way. And that allows you to open up and be creative and to think about other things. The other thing I
Right.
found interesting is that they also found that people that had a hard time they had that negative coping style, that it started to spread to other aspects of their life. And we talked about that in the four different areas. And what they found is
Mm,
that it led them to start to become disappointed, like, oh, I'm a failure here, so therefore I'm a failure here. So it started to
mhm.
spread in their perception of what they thought, and they started to go down a negative emotional spiral because they think, well, it must apply to everything.
Right. Right. Because our emotions don't just, stop in one avenue, they are ever present. So,
Yep.
so if a situation causes certain emotions to come up, you can't just turn it off when that situation is over or when you walk away from that situation.
Yeah.
Um, Leslie posted
Yeah.
a comment here that I just love.
Yes.
I think it's so true. So I believe a lot of the way we handle things can relate closely to the environment we were raised in. How
Hmm.
do we see adults handle stress as we were being influenced growing up?
Yep.
Totally, Leslie. And that's where I think, if I tie back to my comment earlier about negative coping methods, a lot of times those are a part of our habits and our behaviors because they were enforced by our environment.
Hmm.
Um, so whether that was because we saw the people that were modeling how to cope with things were doing it, in that way, or for some other, situations that we had nothing to do with, maybe like, it was just reinforced by the environment that we were
Hmm.
in. That is what causes these types of things to become, habitual and kind of embedded in the way that we operate.
Absolutely. And that's where the EQ comes into play, is noticing that pattern of, oh, the reason I'm doing this is because I learned this from in the past. So how will I approach it differently? Like, now I know, I've acknowledged it. So how can I now the next time go, oh, here it is
Yeah.
again? And the emotional intelligence is then taking control over your own emotions. So if you know it's not a productive process or way to view things or how to act or things like that, it's being able to stop in the moment and go, okay, I'm going to feel this
Yep.
emotion, but I need a moment, for example. So I tend to, because I was modeled growing up to run away from situations, I find that when things get so stressful in an argument, I've been taught to evade. But
Yep.
I taught myself, okay, but if you evade the situation, is that actually helping the situation? Because that just means it's going to happen again and again and again because you
Yes.
haven't actually dealt with it. So
Yeah.
take a moment, feel the emotion, understand how it is you feel, express how you feel, but then say, okay, how can we, in the moment, what is it that we can do to help the situation? What is it that we will agree to in handling whatever that obstacle is, or whatever the challenge is, the conflict is? But if you don't actually take the time to think about it and have a plan in place in how you will handle it the next time it happens,
Right.
then you're just going to continue to repeat it again and again and again and again. And that's just insanity.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the key parts is that, especially when you were talking, Sarah, and you started by saying, I was taught, or it was modeled to me, that when you get into a tough situation, that you run away.
Yep.
Right. And um, some people, once they make that realization, they then sit there. They then sit there and say, well, that was my fucking mom's fault, not my fault. And, they don't motivate themselves to move on, right?
Right.
And we've all experienced that, I think,
Sure.
with people that are, around us. For me personally, I found one of the ways that I was always handling my emotions, especially the negative ones, was to disassociate and to just like push it down and push it away.
Yeah.
And for years and years and years, I had to kind of focus in on the source of where that came from. That came
Mhm.
from the sexual abuse I experienced as a child, the rape I experienced as an adult, and because in order to get through those things, I had disassociated in those moments, but that became a really safe way for me to protect myself. So,
Yeah.
that's how I learned to focus in on my EQ, because those emotions that I was stuffing down, um, they didn't stay down. It doesn't work. You know,
No, it's
it's
still
not
there. It's still impacting you. It's impacting
right.
you health-wise. It's impacting you with relationships, not dealing with challenges and obstacles and finding positive ways to handle them. That's
Right.
just, setting yourself up for failure in my
Yes.
opinion, because that's not allowing a relationship to grow or not allowing you to grow as an individual,
Mhm.
whatever the situation might be.
Right.
So Kate, I want
And
to
then if
focus on some of the role playing, but go ahead.
yes, oh yeah. I was just gonna say, and then you add on other elements and other ways that you kind of navigate your relationships as you're being formed, um, and y- it's really helpful to, like, as an adult, look back and understand where those things come from, but to approach it still internally, because at the end of the day, that is still the only thing you can control.
Exactly. All right.
Okay.
So I want to give you guys, this is a real situation. And so this is something that happened actually this morning that I thought I could use in the role play. So here's the situation. So, Kate, I haven't told you this. So you
Yeah.
thought you would have a Saturday evening open so you and your spouse could have a date night. You thought you were going to have
Okay.
your kids were going to be gone and you're ready to go out for a date night. Well, instead, your kids are gone on Friday night because you confused the days they were supposed to be gone. And now they're going to be back on Saturday night. And so, unfortunately,
Mm.
also your spouse is gone for the night on Friday night. So now, how do you perceive not only the Friday night, but also the Saturday night? So now nobody's going to be in the house with you on Friday night, and
Mhm.
everybody is going to be with you on Saturday night. So that date night that you had is basically, is it potentially gone or is it not? So my question for people also in the audience is, how would you perceive this obstacle of viewing
Mhm.
Friday and Saturday night? Or, how would someone, so I want you to think, how would someone view or perceive it as a negative? So they view it as an obstacle Friday and Saturday night. And then I want you to think
Right.
of the opposite. How would someone perceive this as an opportunity for Friday and Saturday night? So I want to give people a
Mhm.
little bit of time. But I had this situation, and it's almost very similar to what happened to us the other day, that my husband was like, "Oh, it's completely ruined. Like what I was planning on doing, now we can't do." And then he was starting to leave and I was like, "Oh, wait, we could do this." And like I ran outside and I was like, "Hey," I'm like, "what about this?" And he's like, "Oh, I love that idea." And so then we had like an amazing time. So how would someone perceive this as an obstacle? So if I was viewing it as negative, that Friday,
Mhm.
how might I perceive it? I'm now at home by myself. How would a negative person view that Friday night?
Yeah, I think they would, they would be viewing it as lonely. They would
Mhm.
be like, this isn't what I wanted. Um, now
Yeah.
I'm alone, and maybe they would just kind of, crash into some coping skills, but not do so in a way that's really self-care. Do so in a way like, well, I guess I'll just watch TV, or I guess I'll just, eat some fucking ice cream because I'm alone, you know?
Yeah, that's how I was viewing it. So whenever I messaged my husband, I was like, "Oh, I could view it as, oh man, I'm alone. I'm all by myself." Like, "Oh, everybody's leaving me." And
Yeah.
so I could view it that way. So if I were to view it as a positive, how would I view Friday night now?
Yeah, that I would view that as a gift from the gods.
I know.
I would be like, I have the house to myself? Are you serious?
I have time
All
to
right.
myself.
Yes. Yes. Like, and there's so many things you can do by yourself that, you can't necessarily do And they can be as wild as you want, of course, but just some simple self-care,
Yeah.
like just viewing this is an opportunity to just be with me, take a bath, read a book, like do the things that I can't do when my spouse and kids are around.
I was thinking the same thing. I'm not a big book reader, but like I can listen to things that I wanted to listen to. I could take a bubble bath and just nurture myself, or go get in the hot tub and just enjoy
Right.
it. I could do some meditation and just really spend some time with myself. So that's the
Mhm.
positive way of looking at the Friday. So now
Yes.
Saturday night, how would a negative person view that? Like, now my date night, it's
Now
gone.
now the one time I thought I wasn't going to have to be a parent, now I have to be a parent still, right? Because my kids are going to be home and
Ugh.
right.
And I don't get to go have that date night. Like, I wanted to have a date night with you, and now I can't. Like, they're gonna be home.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
and so
Right.
how
So
Go
people would
ahead.
just, I think somebody that isn't viewing that as an opportunity would just kind of, soak up in that negative and kind of wallow a bit, right?
Yep,
And
exactly.
there's a little bit of space for that. Like, you know, in my mind, you can do that for a second, like, oh, what a bummer.
Yeah,
Okay. It's not, that's not ideal. But then how can we turn that into an opportunity? How can we see that differently?
yeah,
I'll tell you that I know exactly what Jenna might say.
yeah,
So she would say, okay, we have our whole lives to go out on a date night. Let's just remember that we aren't getting divorced tomorrow. This isn't the last date night that that we will ever have an opportunity for. And maybe this is happening because we could have a date night with our whole family. We could,
mhm,
instead of viewing this as an opportunity to, because sometimes when you're in the hustle and bustle of being a parent, you view as like, okay, I will do activities that are totally for the kids, and
mhm.
then I earn the right then to do activities that are just for me and my spouse.
Yeah,
That's kind of how you think. But what if there can be somewhat of a balance? What if you guys,
mhm.
what if you can incorporate the kids and treat yourselves to a family date night and
Yeah.
make it something that you all enjoy, not just, a kid's activity versus an adult activity.
I would also say that, okay, maybe I'm spending time with the kids, and maybe I find a babysitter, or maybe I don't need a babysitter and we still go out on a date night. Like,
Right.
duh, is there really an obstacle here? So sometimes people think,
Yeah.
oh, there's an obstacle, but there may not be an obstacle. Like, can you still go out?
You just
Like,
find a different way.
you just
Yeah.
find a different way. So it's
Right.
sometimes it's looking at it completely different, like you said. So it's flipping it's on its head and saying, okay, well, it can be a great night with the kids. And that's what I did when we ended up going to Top Golf. So we were going to go out on a
Mm,
date night the last time, and I was like, "What? We have all of the kids." I'm like, "Let us just go with you to go pick up, Gavin, and then let's go out to do Top Golf. Let's go out to eat. Let's do Top Golf." And Jay's like, "Hell
right.
yeah, Top Golf, let's go." And we
Right.
had a great
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. We sometimes have included our kids in the discussion when this sort of thing has happened, so it'd be like, okay, so we thought, we were going to be able to go have a date. And for whatever reason, we can't, you know, um,
Yeah.
and so we've had situations where we've been like, okay, well, we can only go out for like a little bit because, it's too much for the kiddo that's babysitting to do this for hours at a time,
Mhm.
and that's what we thought we were going to be able to do. And then we've had a conversation with the kids and we've been like, okay, so we're going to go out to dinner. We're going to come home earlier than we thought we were going to because we need to. But, what if we pretended that you guys, we're totally alone in the house, that like both your moms aren't there and they're just really hiding in their bedroom. We've literally had this conversation. I was like, do you think we have to crawl through the windows? Or could we come in the front door? And, and then so you kind of like turn the whole conversation into kind of a goofy one. But at the end of the day, what we were successful doing, and we've done this multiple times, is we get a night to ourselves in our bedroom, and, you know, the kids are there, and, you know, obviously if they need us, they're able to come get us. But, you know, they think of it as a hilarious, you know, activity where we've left them home alone, you know?
Right.
Right. And so,
I love the
but
creativity. It's
yes,
like it's just thinking outside of the box. And so,
right.
okay, well, we ultimately are still alone, but we're still both home.
Right. Yeah. You know, and like we would take it steps further because, you know, then it becomes kind of a game, you know. So we'd be
Mhm.
like, okay, well, if you think we should crawl through the window, you know, I don't know. Like, do you think there's a window in our room that I will fit in? The kids were like, no. And I was like, okay. So should Mama Jenna crawl in the window, and should I crawl through the house? Like, so you won't see me. There, and like just doing all of these ridiculous things and coming up with these scenarios for them to be like, you know what, I don't think it's really necessary, Mom. So why don't you just come home and go to your room? But we've created this, like, you know, we've modeled this way of thinking. We've modeled creativity to them. We've
Yeah.
had fun doing it, you know, and the whole conversation results in exactly where Jen and I knew it was going to go. But we had some fun getting there, which
Mhm.
is such a better way than thinking, okay, well, we'll see you when we get back because we have to be back. So, you know,
Mhm.
see you soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I love how it is that we started with the happy accidents, so
Mm-hmm.
viewing things first as, okay, well, maybe it was meant to be, and how does this turn into something? And some of the best inventions in the world. So the biggest happy accident was actually penicillin. It wasn't even planned.
Oh
And
yeah.
they actually created penicillin, which everyone uses. And so when you think about the things that are happening to you and thinking about, okay, well, is there another purpose? Because I actually, every time I have an obstacle, I'm like, oh, okay, this isn't going how I wanted. So I literally will say to myself, okay, is there an opportunity here? Is there
Mm-hmm.
something I'm not seeing because I'm so focused on what it is that I'm wanting that I'm not opening up the capabilities of looking at something else? So I always say to myself, what is it that's going on in this particular moment? And I need to open up my scope, my perception of looking for other things. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that people tend to look through a hole versus opening it up and looking at the world and the possibilities.
Right.
So-
Yeah. This is great. Viagra, meant for blood pressure, but had a hidden talent. Just it. It is a happy accident. It's
Hashtag happy
surprising.
accident.
Hashtag happy accident. Viagra was a happy accident. That is so true, Leslie. And it's surprising to me how often we can use Viagra as an example.
I know. What is that?
Yeah, we were able to use it with Thomas LeMay in that conversation. It's very interesting.
Yeah. And so I'm curious for you guys, do you tend to look at things as I can't or I can? Because ultimately, that is when you boil down to looking at things as obstacles or viewing things as opportunities, it's viewing it as I can or I can't.
And to push yourself a little further, you don't, you know, it's not always the case that you are an entirely, you know, obstacle person, you know, like viewing person, or you see everything as an obstacle.
Right.
It might be just kind of compartmentalized for you. It might be easy for you to see some things as an opportunity and not others. And there is an opportunity in and of itself to kind of look at the skills you're using in one
Mhm.
area and see, how can I apply these to other areas? How can I take what I know I'm already good at, and
Yes.
how can I tweak it enough to make it fit and work for me in an area that always feels negative,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
And when I say I can and I can't, I do want to emphasize that it may not be I can do what it is that I'm trying to do. It might be I can do something else that'll start to lead me down a different path, or I can do something else that is completely different. So it's
Mm-hmm.
focusing on what you can do versus what you can't. And it might not be that one thing. So again, it's opening up and thinking about it in a different way.
Right.
Where are the opportunities?
Like Bruce said, creativity is
Yes.
always your best friend. And so
I
that's
love it.
where it is. Like, you know, let's say you are, you know, like Casey, you're creative, you're able to paint, you know, you have the creativity there to push out and put onto a canvas. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you can leverage those same creative skills toward, you know, maybe other obstacles in other areas of your life, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
but it's taking the time to really think about, okay, what do I do when I'm feeling creative? How does that look? What are the situations that, or what is the environment that like gives me the freedom to be creative? You know,
Mm-hmm.
so, okay, how can I create that now in this situation?
Yeah. So Leslie added some further things. So you got to be able to roll with whatever happens. No sense
Yes.
in being upset about something you can't control. If it rains when you're planning a picnic, you just eat inside. Or maybe you
Yeah.
just have fun in the rain and grab some umbrellas.
Yes. Yes. Yep. There was a huge rainstorm here the other day, and Breland ran right into Mama Jenna while she was working on some schoolwork and said, "Can I put on my swimsuit and go outside?" Jenna was like, "Absolutely." You know, yes, that is a perfect thing to do.
I know, it's almost like a puddle. Like growing
Yeah.
up, you viewed a puddle as fun. Now as you get older, yeah, someone else said playing in the puddles, and so you now view them as, "Oh, I wanna avoid that puddle. Like, I don't wanna get
Right.
wet. I don't wanna get
Right.
dirty."
No. Right. Yep. Exactly.
So,
But how fun is it to just see it as a playground?
yeah. Well, I hope today was helpful for people just to view things maybe a little bit differently as happy accidents, or viewing things in a different perspective, understanding what AQ is, EQ is, and how you might do a little bit of role playing. So the role playing at the end is really one of the best things that you can do, is think about a situation and say, okay, how would someone that views this as a negative or an obstacle view this? How would someone that views this as a positive or a potential opportunity look at it? And so doing that role playing for yourself doesn't even
Mm-hmm.
require anybody else. And I would also encourage you to do that with your kids, because that is helping them to grow, to learn how to overcome obstacles. And I would also say, don't solve their problems. Like, let them figure it out, because this
Right.
is one of the key areas that as people start to go out on their own, can they solve their own problems, or do they need to come back to mom and dad? And
Yes.
so you want to help kids to be able to problem solve for themselves.
Yeah, to build that resilience so that they have the endurance to handle some of these things moving forward.
Yeah.
Um,
And Kate, I
definitely.
just wanted to
So,
so I wanted to say thank you to Xavier and Breland for participating and agreeing to doing the video with us, and thank you to Jenna for doing the artwork. And so I loved the change up today.
yeah, yeah. Well, it was one of the ways I coped with my big to-do list. I was like, how can I outsource some of this? You know? and
How can I
and Jenna
delegate?
even came, yeah, and Jenna even came in and she looked, because I also put a new whiteboard up on my wall to keep things more in my face, you know. So I have them multiple places. I may have them on my calendar, but I also have them on my wall, you know, so I can kind of always see them. And she was looking at the list too, and she's like, I think I can, you know, what is this obstacles art you're going to do? Maybe that's it. I was like, yeah, actually, maybe it is. so that was, you know, an example of a way that it was totally, you know, a different way to look at it. It never occurred to me that I could get help with any of the stuff, because it
Yeah.
wasn't family stuff. It wasn't, to me, it wasn't, helpable stuff, but it ended
Yeah.
up being so.
You thought outside of the box, or maybe Jenna thought outside of the box to help you.
Right. It's hard for us to know sometimes, who's leading the out of the box thinking. But
Yeah,
it doesn't matter as long as we get there, Um,
exactly. Yeah.
and the only other thing I would say is with all this practicing that you do, you can do it after a situation too. So just last night I was looking back at a situation I had where, where I recognize now that I kind of wallowed a little bit too bit. And so then I kind of thought about it differently. Like, okay, so if this were to happen again, how would I handle it? So
I
that's a
love
great
that.
form of practicing. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. It's the mistakes that happen. And like, what have I learned from this? How will I handle it differently? How can I handle
Yeah.
it in more of a positive manner? And so
How can
Carmen
I-
said, have a
yeah.
great day. Thank you too for starting my day off right. And
Yeah.
and I just, love this particular topic. Oh, next week we are going to have Julie Ross Power. So I'm going to be posting that this weekend. It should be a really good one. Cate unfortunately won't be with us, but I'm going to look at it in the positive. So I'm going to have a little bit more of an intimate conversation with Julie one-on-one. So I'm looking at how it's an opportunity versus not having Cate there. But we will miss you, Cate. And
I
Leslie
have
just said happy 50th birthday to my husband James. She had to throw that in there. So happy
Aw,
birthday, JJ. So I know
how
I'm a JJ.
fun. Aw, I love that. Happy 50th
Yeah.
birthday. That's such a fun one.
Yeah.
I have a little fantasy that next week when you guys are talking that I will be able to be awake and watch and comment. We'll have to see.
Okay.
But I think it would be awesome if I can get to see it live.
I
So
love that.
I'm
Yeah. And so I'll
hopeful. Yeah.
be on the lookout for that. Now, the following week, Cate and I haven't made a decision on what the topic's going to be. And so we had maybe some ideas and we wanted to see what you guys thought. So one of them was talking about feminine and masculine energy and the differences between those two and what they
Mm-hmm.
actually are. And I'm trying to think of some of the other things, Cate, that we had. One of them was leading without the title. So
Mm,
I really like that idea as well, because a lot of times people don't necessarily have the title and therefore they feel like they can't necessarily lead. So
right.
we're curious. Maybe there's another topic that
Yeah.
you would like us to cover. So let us know. Just add it in the comments. If you're viewing this afterwards, let us know what your thoughts are as we start to look at other things. We're looking at other individuals that we're interviewing as well. We have one planned in October that should be super cool. It's
Yes.
going to be on Friday, the 13th of October, and it's going to be
Mm.
Roxanne Fernwell, and she is a medium psychic.
Mm.
And so I'm super excited to chat with her. She's actually in the UK, so it'll be like 2:30 her time. But she has agreed to join us on Friday the 13th and in October.
I'm super excited about that.
Yeah.
That's going to be amazing.
Yeah. And we're continuing to look for other guests. On the 29th, Carrie couldn't join us today. She had I think she was moving. So she was in the process of moving today. And so I hope that she has a safe moving trip and everything is
Yeah.
as not as stressful as moving can be. But she'll be joining us for shooting the shit on September the 29th.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome.
Will be.
I would love it if we did some educational episodes at some point, like around astrology,
Ooh.
other things that you and I have interest in, but we, um, So I think that would be really, really cool.
Yeah.
And like oracle cards and tarot cards, those can be so fun. And you don't, you can have fun with those, no matter, who you are. You don't have to be like a voodoo princess to have fun with
Yeah.
those types of cards. So those are other topics. I don't know if those resonate with folks. Super interested to know what else you guys might want to see or do or experience, or what types of guests you want to hear from. So
Yeah.
please let us know. Please interact and let us know. We'd be so appreciative.
Yes, absolutely. And for those joining us afterwards, be sure to add in those comments. Let us know that you watched it. And, I do continue to get individuals that for whatever reason, they like to keep their anonymity a little bit more private. And so I do appreciate you reaching out to us, just letting us know that you're watching. And so, so Kate, do you want to, in things today and
Yeah.
people well.
Yes, thank you so much, Myra. I think it's been a great show too. I know that Sarah and I have had fun. So I hope this fuels your Friday and the rest of your weekend, and that you guys all have a badass weekend and get ready for your week next week. So let this fuel you. Go on and be your badass selves.
Thank you, Kate. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.